My mom's new husband came into my room while I was only wearing a shirt. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in what you would have done in his bliss. The story is getting hotter. My name is Alina. I'm 21. I live with my mom and her new husband. He's 46, and his name is Igor. He's not my father, but from day one, he acted like he'd known my whole life. Always attentive, always around, always a little too close. I used to think maybe it was just him being caring, or maybe it was all in me head. But everything changed the night my mom went to my grandma's for a couple of days, and it was just the two of us. I got out of the shower, threw on a long shirt, and lazily walked to my room. I figured he was already asleep, but I was wrong. The door quietly cracked open, and he appeared in theater way. His gaze swept over me, and lingered. "Aren't you afraid of catching a cold?" he said with a smirk. I just shrewd. "It's warm in here." He walked closer and said, "You should still put something else on. You're making me lose my train of thought." I smiled without moving. "And what were you thinking about?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me in a way no one ever had before. And then he said, "I thought you were already grown up, but it turns out you're dangerous." He turned and left, leaving the door ajar in me with a wildly pounding heart and a strange feeling that this was just beginning. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the silence in the hallway. My heart was pounding like crazy, and there was a weird excitement in my chest, as if I had accidentally crossed an invisible line and couldn't go back. I closed the door, but not all the way, just like he had, and got in tubbed. My shirt was clinging to my body and the cool from my wet hair tickled my neck. I tried to fall asleep, but my mind was stuck on him. His look, his voice, those words. Dangerous. In the morning, he acted like nothing had happened. Served me breakfast, handed me a cup of coffee, and said, "You went to bed late last night." I looked at him over the rim of my cup and replied, "How do y'all?" He shrugged. The door was creaking. I almost choked on my coffee. "Or, did you leave it open on purpose?" Headed quietly, standing up and leaning in close. "If you're playing a game, just know that I can play too." And in that moment, I understood. We had both started a game from which we would never come back the same. All day, it was like we were circling each other. He would get a little too close, brush against my arm as he walked by, and each time, he'd look into my eyes for just a second too long. I pretended Vireen was fine, but inside, I was on fear. That evening, I deliberately put in the same shirt and went to the kitchen for some water. He was sitting at the table, reading something on his laptop. He looked up, and I saw his eyes traced down my legs, stopping on Mithi where the fabric had parted slightly. "You're wearing that again," he said calmly, but his voice was tight with tension. I walked closer and leaned against the table, as if by accident. "It's comfortable," I replied. "Or is it a problem?" He closed his laptop. "No, it's not a problem. Quite the opposite, it's distracting." Then he slowly stood up, never breaking eye contact. He walked past me, his shoulder just barely touching mine. As he reached the door, he glanced back over his shoulder. "You know exactly what you're doing, Alina," and with that, he disappeared into his room. I was left standing there feeling an electric current run through me skin. And for the first time in my life, I wanted him to come back. I waited for the light in his room to go out, and only then did I quietly go back to mine. But I couldn't sleep. The shirt felt like it was burning, as if it had absorbed his words. I paced the room trying to distract myself, but my insides were already on fire. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. The door creaked and then stopped, but he didn't come in. He just walked past, or pretended to. I made up my mind. I opened my door, and peeked into Thelway. He was standing by the window, his back to me, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. It was like he was waiting without turning around. He said, "Do ya want some water, or did you come out in that shirt for another reason?" I stepped closer. "What if I do?" He turned slowly. "Hice is dark. Then come in. The door isn't locked." He then disappeared into his room. I didn't think. I just followed him, walked in, and quietly closed the door behind me. He was standing by his desk with his back to me. Then he turned around, looked into my eyes, and said softly, "I can't pretend anymore that I didn't see, that I don't want to." He closer and whispered, "You don't thave too." In the next moment, his hands were on my hips. My breath caught. The shirt slipped from my shoulders, and of everything that had been held back broke free with one touch. One look, one night had changed everything. The morning wasn't, as if time itself was afraid to scurry away what had happened between us. I woke up before he did and watched him sleep. He was strong, relaxed, nothing like the strict, composed stepfather I was who said to, seeing during the day. I carefully slipped out of bed, put on the same shirt, and quietly went to the kitchen. A couple of minutes later, he followed, his hair a mess. In one hand, he had his shirt. In the other, a look that once again sent a shiver down my spine. Huked over, put his arms around my waist, and whispered in my ear, "Now we're my secret. And you know what? I'm dumb good at keeping secrets." We ate breakfast in silence. Our eyes did all the talking, and every touch seemed to confirm it. This wasn't a mistake. This was a beginning. Later that day, he went to the store, and when he came back, he left a note on my table that read, "Tonight again. Only this time, be quieter." I smiled, clutching the paper in my hand, and realized there was no turning back. And I didn't want to. All day I caught myself counting the hours, the seconds, until nightfall. I tried, toked normal, sitting with a book, making dinner, cleaning up, but everything felt fake because inside there was only one thing. Anticipation. When the clock showed almost midnight, I was already in bed, but wide awake, just waiting. I was waiting for the door to creak, for the click of the lock. And in the next moment, he was standing in the doorway, wearing a dark sweatshirt. His eyes gleamed like a predator who knows exactly what he's here for. Without a word, he came over, lay down next to me, pulled me close, and whispered, "I'm not leaving until morning this time." His hand slid down my back, and my breathing grew deeper. This time, nothing was spontaneous or out of control. It was as if we had rehearsed this thousands after miles. It was gentle, precise, and slow. We spoke in whispers, laughed and kissed as if this were our first night in a world where no one would judge us. Later, he fell asleep, holding me tight as if he was afraid I would disappear. I lay beside him, thinking how strange that what I was so afraid of at first became the one thing I couldn't live without. The next morning, everything was different. There were no more awkward glances or tense silences. Instead, the house felt light. As if the walls themselves had accepted our secret and promised to stay quiet. He brewed coffee. I fried eggs. We smiled at each other, as if we had always lived like these. At one point, he came up behind him, kissed my neck, and said, "You know, I never thought this was possible." Beauty, happy. I turned around, looked in Tohei's eyes, and whispered, "Me, too. But, need to be careful." He nodded, hugged me tightly, and replied, "I won't let anyone ruin this. You hear me?" No one. And I believed him, because for the first time in my life, I felt not just desired, but truly needed. That summer night, he came again, no longer shy. Who is confident and calm. He lay down next to me, took my hand, and said, "Do you want me to take you away from here, so we didn't have to hide anymore?" I froze, my heart pounding fast. But then I, nodded in for the first time, said out loud, "Yes, I want to be with you anywhere." He smiled and quietly added, "Then starting tomorrow, we'll begin with a clean slate. Just you and me." I just held on to him tighter, knowing we would fill that page together. The next day, everything changed. He picked me up in his car. He told my mom he was going away on a business trip for a couple of days. And I was supposedly going to a friend's house. But in reality, we drove to the next town, rented a small apartment for the night, and for the first time, we were together, not as a secret fantasy, but as a real couple. We walked the streets holding hands, had dinner in a cafe where no one knew us, and laughed like teenagers. I caught the envious glances of other women and felt him being proud of me. When we got back to the apartment, he closed the door, came over, pinned me against the wall, and said, "This is how I want to live forever. No more hiding, no one getting in our way." I traced his cheek with my fingers and replied, "Then let's not wit." He looked into my eyes and said softly, "I'll leave your mother, but only if you really want me to." I took a step closer, pressed myself against him, and said, "I've already made my choice." That night, we fell asleep together on a narrow bed. But it felt like the biggest place on earth, because it finally had everything: warmth, freedom, and us. In the morning, he woke me with a kiss, warm and slow, as if he wanted to extend the night and not let a single second go. I opened my eyes and saw him looking at me, not as a stepfather, not as a older man, but as a person who had found his home. He whispered, "I've made up my mind. I'm going to tell her everything today. You need to be free." And so, Doi. My heart tightened with anxiety. Booty nodded. "I'm with you," I said. Hello, leaving me the apartment keys and a short message. "No more secrets. Wait for me." I paced the room, unable to settle down until he finally came back. His eyes were serious, but the fear was gone. "She knows everything, she's gone," he said. "No yelling, no drama, she just left." She just left. I rushed to him, hugging him tight, and he whispered in my ear, "Now we don't owe anyone anything, only each other." And in that moment, endorsed, all the prohibitions were in the past. Ahead of us was the present we chose for ourselves. That night, we didn't whisper, hide, or close the door cautiously. He took my last bit of shyness away. and every look, every touch, seemed to say, "You're mine and no one will dare to separate us." We lay there, in silence for a long time, pressed against each other. I could feel his breathing become calm only when I was near. Towards morning, he said, "Do you want to go anywhere? Start over?" Not as a former stepfather and stepdaughter, but just as a man and a woman. I looked into his eyes and smiled. "I've only seen you as a man for a long time," he smirked and added. "Then tomorrow, we'll pack our bags and go somewhere no one knows us." And I knew that with him, I wanted to start a life without hiding, without explaining, justo be his, and for him to be mine forever. The morning was light, as if the past had been erased overnight. He booked us tickets to a small seaside town where no one knew his name or mine. We packed our things quickly, as if we were afraid we might change our minds, even though we had already decided everything long ago. He held my hand the entire way, never letting go, as if he was afraid of losing me again. When we arrived, we rented a cozy house with easy view, the fresh air, the seagulls, the complete feeling of freedom. For the first time, I could laugh loudly next to him and kiss him without looking over Miss Holder. He sat down, the suitcase come over, hugged me, and said, "This is where we'll start for real." In that very second, I knew I was home, because me home was no longer walls and a roof. It was his arms, his voice, and the way he looked at me, as if I were everything had. We started our lives anew, as if everything before had been a long prologue to the real story. He opened a small boat repair shop by the sea. I'd go to job at a local cafe where he'd come every day for a cup of coffee, always with a smile and eyes that said, "You are mine." In the evenings, we would walk barefoot on the beach. He would carry me in his arms when the waves were high. We'd laugh and fall into the sand like children. And at night, he'd kiss me as if it were the first time every time. One day, he came up behind me while I was washing dishes, wrapped his arms around my waist, rested his cheek against my neck, and whispered, "You know, I'm so glad you aren't scared back then that you followed through." I smiled. "And you? Ich knew you'd be mine one day. Ever since I first saw you in that damn shirt, Hesed." I laughed and whispered, "So, Edel started with it?" "No," he said, kissing my neck. "Edel started with you." And once again, I felt the same thing I had that first night. As if the whole world had disappeared and only where remained. That night, he didn't just enter the bedroom. He entered me, my soul, my very essence. Not as a stepfather, not as a man, but as someone new who knew every part of my body, every tremble. He looked into my eyes, never breaking his gaze, and whispered, "No one has ever been inside me as deeply as you are." I wasn't breathless from Thepis, but from how he felt me, as if he were reading my thoughts. His movements were rough and sharp, but each one washed on the edge, as if he could have eaten everything apart, but didn't want to break me, only to take me completely over. He held his hands on my hips as if he was afraid to let go. And I moaned his name again and again, as if with that sound I was trying to hold on to eternity. And when everything started to throb with tension, he leaned in and whispered in my ear, "You're mine. You're inside, under my skin, under my heart, forever." Then he added, with Asmerk. And yes, that was long, but I'm not finished yet. And I knew that this night would become the legend of my body.